played straight as no more than an extravagant adventure with a big star and a few dazzling visual set pieces, director Michael Lehman, reportedly nicknamed Michael Lame Man on set, might just have walked away from the wreckage in one piece. I remember being at a press screening for Hudson Hawk at the Odeon Leicester Square, where the stunning silence that greeted the movie's endless stream of self-referential in-jokes was broken only by the sound of fellow critic Kim Newman and me howling like hyenas. The more no one else laughed, the funnier Hudson Hawk became, at least for Kim and me, and at the end of the screening we pretty much had to crawl out on our hands and knees, having been doubled up with paralysing merriment for so long. But the film's failure to hit anyone else's funny bone meant that it took a pitiful $17 million in the US, although it did inevitably become something of a hit on video. A few years after that screening, I was on a radio show with Willis's co-star Richard E. Grant, who described Hudson Hawk as a steaming hot pile of elephant droppings. When I told him how much I had enjoyed it, he was genuinely shocked and not a little outraged. The film had kicked the crap out of TriStar's already crumbling finances, and Grant was still gamely struggling to put the stench of its failure behind him. Yet as recently as June 2011, the thoroughly respectable Sight and Sound magazine published a passionate defence of Hudson Hawk that listed it as one of the overlooked multiplex gems of the past 30 years, not least because, quote, as the Mayflower twins, Sandra Bernhard and Richard E. Grant are among the best comic villains ever. If there's a lesson to be learned here, it is that comedy, unlike sheer spectacle, is a toxically unpredictable commodity which simply cannot be relied upon to tickle an audience's fancy and which, if mishandled, will blow up in a filmmaker's face. For further proof of the dangers of misjudging expensive laughs, look no further than Rennie Harlin's 1995 pirate comedy Cutthroat Island. The film, which regularly appears in lists of all-time flops, as indeed does Roman Polanski's comparable Pirates, cost and lost about the same amount as Hudson Hawk, although it was no worse a movie than Pirates of the Caribbean, which duly made a fortune rehashing the same tired riffs a decade later. But crucially, POTC wasn't sold as a comedy. Rather, it was marketed as a spectacular thrill ride in the mould of Indiana Jones, a fantastical adventure packed with eye-popping spectacle which just happened to contain a few take-it-or-leave-it jokes. In fact, according to all reports, the studio were genuinely terrified when they first saw the rushes of Johnny Depp doing his humorous Keith Richards impression and begged director Gore Verbinski to get him to tone it down for fear that his outrageous gurning might actually kill the movie. The last thing the money men wanted was an expensive movie based on a popular fairground ride that depended upon making the audience laugh for its success rather than simply bludgeoning them with stars and whizzo special effects. Their fears turned out to be unfounded when it transpired that audiences were actually charmed by Depp's shambling antics, a response which still baffles me to this day, and POTC became a socking great hit. But the fact remains that, had Depp's humorous shtick fallen as flat with a mainstream audience as it did with me, the film could have joined Cutthroat Island in the ranks of overpriced failures which have demonstrated that, in the words of Woody Allen, insufficient laughter is grounds for divorce. The ne plus ultra of this rule was the 2002 Eddie Murphy comedy fantasy The Adventures of Pluto Nash, for which divorce proceedings swiftly gave way to a restraining order that prevented the movie from getting within a 50-mile radius of its intended audience. Costing $100 million, almost none of which it recouped on its horrendous theatrical release, Pluto Nash left Castle Rock executives crying into their cappuccinos when Murphy deemed the movie too embarrassingly unfunny to promote. Just think about that for a moment. A film which is so staggeringly lacking in laughs that even Eddie Murphy didn't want to be associated with it. How unfunny could that be? This is the same Eddie Murphy who once joked that director John Landis was more likely to work again with Vic Moreau, who was decapitated on the set of Twilight Zone the movie, than with him, but who still signed on for Landis's Beverly Hills Cop 3 when the fat paycheck was dangled before his eyes. The same Eddie Murphy who torched his chances of winning an Oscar for his standout role in Dreamgirls by donning the fat suit for Norbit, which was released in time to remind Academy members just how ghastly he could be. The same Eddie Murphy whose greatest role to date has been providing the voice of Donkey in the Shrek movies, proving conclusively that the one thing he's guaranteed to get right is talking out of his ass. When a comedian of that calibre tells you that Pluto Nash doesn't meet his quality control standards, you know you need to steer well clear, which moviegoers did in their millions. In absolute financial terms, i.e. regardless of any adjustments for inflation or ancillary sales, Pluto Nash was long regarded by some industry watchers to have accrued the biggest theatrical money loss ever, somewhere in the region of $96 million, a figure which easily overshadows the losses of Kevin Costner's super serious 1997 dud The Postman, aka Post-Apocalyptic Pat, which flopped for being expensive but solidly unspectacular, but which would surely have done even worse if Kevin had told jokes. While Speed Racer, no stars, The Alamo, little spectacle, and Sahara, Hudson Hawkey humour, all posted losses in the noughties, the only recent movie to bear catastrophic comparison with Pluto Nash is the Robert Zemeckis-produced Mars Needs Mums, which had an estimated budget of something in the region of $150 million, but which took a paltry $21 million in the US and $35 million in total worldwide, a figure which should make even Eddie Murphy laugh. There are umpteen reasons why Zemeckis' folly failed to recoup. A movie costing that much needs to be a spectacular star-studded event rather than a limp motion capture comedy featuring the voices of Seth Green and Joan Cusack. But, as we shall see in the next chapter, the real explanation for its monstrous reception may well have more to do with a collective audience protest against the overpriced tyranny of 3D than with any innate dramatic failings. In the meantime, we're still left with the general rule that bona fide event movies featuring proper stars, massive visual extravagance and newsworthy budgets are still a depressingly safe bet as long as you're not banking on making anyone laugh. All of which raises a very simple question. If an event movie can make its money back, no matter how unpalatably awful it may be, as long as it abides by a fairly simple set of rules, why not make something really good just for the hell of it? If the presence of a whopping budget, a retina-scorching spectacle, and a Beezer cast list is all you need to break even, why bother to make something as terrible as Pearl Harbor? Why not go hell for leather and make something decent? If financial success is all but guaranteed in the long run, doesn't that actually offer the most extraordinary artistic freedom? Or look at it this way. Every time I complain that a blockbuster movie is directorially dumb or insultingly scripted or crappily acted or artistically barren, I get a torrent of emails from alleged mainstream movie lovers complaining that I, as a snotty critic, am applying highbrow criteria that cannot and should not be applied to good old undemanding blockbuster entertainment. I am not alone in this. Every critic worth their salt has been lectured about their distance from the demands of popular cinema, or has been told that their views are somehow elitist and out of touch. And if you haven't been told this, then you are not a critic, you are a showbiz correspondent. This has become the shrieking refrain of 21st century film anti-culture. The idea that critics are just too clever for their own good, have seen too many movies to know what the average punter wants, and are therefore sorely unqualified to pass judgment on the popcorn fodder that real cinema-goers demand from the movies. This is baloney, and worse, it is pernicious baloney, peddled by people who are only interested in money and don't give a damn about cinema. The problem with movies today is not that real cinema-goers love garbage, whilst critics only like poncy foreign language art house fare. The problem is that we've all learned to tolerate a level of overpaid, institutionalized corporate dreadfulness that no one actually likes, but everyone meekly accepts because we've all been told that blockbuster movies have to be stupid to survive. Being intelligent will cause them to become unpopular. Duh! The more money you spend, the dumb and dumberer you have to be. You know the drill. No one went broke underestimating the public intelligence. That's just how it is, okay? Well, actually, no. You want proof? Okay, Exhibit A, Inception. Inception is an artistically ambitious and intellectually challenging thriller from writer-director Christopher Nolan, who made his name with the temporally dislocated low-budget art house puzzler Memento. Nolan unfashionably imagines that his audience are sentient beings and treats them as such regardless of budget. Memento cost $5 million, had no stars or special effects, aimed high nonetheless, expected its audience to keep up, and reaped over $25 million in the US alone. Inception cost $160 million, had huge stars and blinding special effects, aimed high nonetheless, expected its audience to keep up, and took around $800 million worldwide. See a connection here? Nolan earned the right to make a movie as intelligent and expensive as Inception by grossing Warner Brothers close to $1.5 billion with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, both of which can best be described as art house movies posing as massive franchise blockbusters. I remember being genuinely stunned by the level of invention at work in Batman Begins and burbling to Radio 5 Live listeners that it was far, far smarter than any of us had the right to expect from a movie which cost that much. But why shouldn't it be smart? Why shouldn't we expect movies that cost that much to be worth it? Because we've been told for too long that popular movies must, by their very nature, be terrible, and we've all learned to accept this horrendous untruth. As for Inception, the idea that a mainstream audience could embrace a movie that includes the lines, "Sorry, whose dream are we in?" and "He's militarized his subconscious," would seem anathema to the studio heads and their mealy-mouthed media minions who've been telling us for decades that dumb is beautiful. Yet Nolan has become one of the most financially reliable directors working in Hollywood without ever checking his intellect in at the door. Did no one ever explain the rules to him? Did he miss a meeting? Now, don't get me wrong, Inception isn't perfect, nor is it stunningly original as some would have you believe. The plot, which revolves around explosive industrial espionage played out within the interlocking layers of an unsuspecting psyche, is essentially dreamscape with A-levels and draws upon a number of populist sources, ranging from Wes Craven's horror sequel A Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors to Alejandro Amenabar's Spanish oddity Open Your Eyes, later remade in Hollywood as the inferior Tom Cruise vehicle Vanilla Sky. It is also, in essence, an existential Bond movie on Her Majesty's psychiatric service. But like great pop music, groundbreaking cinema rarely arrives ex nihilo, and the fact that Nolan seems to have watched and loved a lot of genre trash in his time merely increases his significant stature in my eyes. Too many blockbuster movies nowadays seem to be made by people who hate cinema, who have seen too few movies, and who have nothing but contempt for the audiences who pay their grotesquely overinflated salaries. So, did Inception become a money-spinning hit because it boasts a really smart script? I'd like to think so, but honestly, no. Would it have taken less money if it had been less intelligent? Maybe, probably not, who knows. Would it have taken more money if it had been less intelligent? Maybe, probably not, who knows. Would it have made anything like that amount of money if it didn't include A, an A-list star, B, eye-popping special effects, C, a newsworthy budget? Definitely not. So what does the success, both financial and artistic, of Inception prove? Simply this, that, as I may have mentioned before, if you spend enough money, bag an A-list star and pile on the spectacle, the chances are your movie will not lose money, unless it's a comedy, regardless of how smart or dumb it may be. Trying to be funny may be a massive risk, fail and your movie goes down, but trying to be clever never hurt anyone. Clearly, the exact amount of money a movie will ultimately make will be affected to some degree by whether or not anyone actually likes it. Titanic couldn't have become a record-breaking profit maker if some people hadn't wanted to see it twice, and whatever my own personal problems with the film, I can see that loads of people really do love it to pieces. But the fact remains that if you obey the 3 rules of blockbuster entertainment, an intelligent script will not, as is widely claimed, make your movie tank or alienate your core audience. Even if they don't understand the film, they'll show up and pay to see it anyway, in just the same way they'll flock to see films that are rubbish and which they don't actually enjoy. Like Pearl Harbor. This may sound like a terribly depressing scenario, that multiplex audiences will stump up for event movies regardless of their quality. But look at it this way. If the audiences will show up whether a movie is good or bad, then does the opportunity not exist to make something genuinely adventurous with little or no risk? If the studio's money is safe regardless of what they do, artistically speaking, why not do something of which they can be proud? If you're working in a marketplace in which the right kind of gargantuan expense all but guarantees equivalent returns, where's the downside in pushing the artistic envelope? Why dumb down when the dollar is going up? Why be Michael Bay when you could be Christopher Nolan? In fact, despite the asinine whining of those cultural collaborators who have invested their fortunes in the